is up, everyone? Welcome to the Fun with Friends podcast. I'm your host, Allie, and joining me for today's episode is Nina from the Podcast Voyage. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. This is my first ever podcast interview.
Hopefully it's painless and is a nice experience. But I'm super excited to have you on, and I'm so glad we connected on Instagram, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, right.
And you have like a really interesting story about how you became a podcast manager and kind of a really interesting journey. So I immediately was like, I had to have you on the podcast to learn more about your journey and what you do as a podcast manager. So thanks again so much for being on.
Yeah, no problem. I'm excited to chat about it. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, and so you started off as, well, actually, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Who I am? Well, so I am Nina. I'm 26. I live in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And so after having many jobs, I started my business, the Podcast Voyage, a few months ago. And so as a podcast manager, that's what I am. I help business owners with the launch of their podcast or their ongoing management when they already have a podcast. And besides this, I am obsessed with traveling. That's also one of the reasons we connected, of course.
Yes.
And that's pretty much the drive behind a lot of things I do as well. I love 80s music, especially Madonna. And I am a massive book reader. I love books. And I'm also still really looking forward to reading your book on midnight. So that's going to be good. So I guess that's like a short little bio about me.
Yeah, and I actually think we've talked about having you on the podcast again just to talk about travel stuff alone. So That's another episode I'm looking forward to, because you, as you mentioned, you're a huge reader and you travel a lot with books, which blows my mind because I can barely travel with enough clothes to like get through like a couple days of travel. So to be able to travel with everything you need plus several books is impressive to me.
I mean, you need to prioritize. Books are important.
It's all about prioritizing. I like that.
Well, I'm sure a lot of my journey to becoming a podcast manager has also to do with a bit of travel. So we're probably going to touch down on some travel related subjects as well.
Absolutely. And that's to start with. So you actually worked for a travel agency before becoming a podcast manager, right?
That's true. I worked at a travel agency that was specialized in cruise ship travel because I love cruises. My mom took me on my first cruise when I was 11. That was the first time I went to the United States as well, because we traveled from Miami and then I took a Caribbean cruise.
Oh,
so
nice.
For an 11-year-old being from Amsterdam, of course, it's amazing. Like a long flight, like a huge country you're going to, everything's different. It's so different. Like it was a big culture shock. And I fell in love with cruising straight away. So we started doing that every couple of years. So that's also why I decided to start working at a travel agency that was specialized in cruise ship travel.
I have never been on a cruise before.
Fair enough.
But eventually, I definitely want to. But
yeah, like what kind of cruise would you like to go on?
Oh, no. Probably something similar to what you did, like a Caribbean cruise. I like the idea of like warm water, warm weather, beaches, and then being back on the boat and hanging out. So probably something similar to that. But then I know you can do cruises up to Alaska.
Yeah.
And I would love to do one of those. I think that would be beautiful.
I think those are like, I sold a lot of them when I was still working at the cruise ship company and they looked amazing. I was always so envious of the people that were like booking them with me. And I was like, I want to come with you.
You're right.
Take me with you.
Please take me with you. So it sounds like, I mean, you have like a real passion for travel. And so I'm curious as to what prompted you to make that change from travel focused work to podcast manager.
Well, I've been thinking about starting a business online for a while. Even when I was working at the travel agency, I wanted to do something online eventually. It's because I just want to pack my laptop and go. Around that time, I was also planning a world trip. I was supposed to go travel around Southeast Asia and South America for like a year, and that would be around November 2020. But of course, we all know what happened. The pandemic hit, and I was still working at the travel agency around that time. And so, yeah, that was probably what prompted the biggest switch. Like, okay, now the pandemic started. What's next? Like, we can't travel right now. How am I going to start working from anywhere in the world right now? And I'm going to make money online? That was my biggest question around that time. But I was still at the travel agency. As much as I loved that job, when the pandemic hit, obviously it wasn't that much fun anymore. I think I worked there for like 3 to 4 more months into the pandemic, but every day I got like a bigger knot in my stomach because the clients were obviously in panic. They were angry. They wanted their money back. So I spoke to a lot of angry people in 3 months' time that really messed with my mental state a little bit as well, up to the point where one day I had to go to work and I came in late to work because I had a panic attack. And so when I came to work, I chatted with my manager about that. And 2 days later, I quit. Like, we had discussed, like, okay, we can't go on like this anymore. And so 2 days later, I quit the travel agency job. So then I was just lost. Like, I imagine a lot of people were around that time. Like, it was so big and nobody knew, like, how long was this going to take? What was going to happen next? So I really took some time around the pandemic to figure out what I wanted to do next. And travel was still high on my list, but obviously I didn't know when that was possible again. So yeah, I got like another side job that paid my bills. It wasn't great. It was like an order picking job, but it gave me some flexibility. It gave me some time to think about what I really wanted. And then like I saw a bunch of things around like social media management, VA work, like all the online service provider things that are massive and a lot of people are doing, but none of it really clicked. And I was looking into it because I saw it as a way out and like being able to work from online. But at the same time, I was like, then I'm going to do it, but my mind isn't really into it because it doesn't sound like fun. I'm just doing it so that I'll be able to travel. So a lot of time in between passed, and around spring or summer 2021 in Europe around here, travel sort of started to become accessible again. A couple of countries reopened their borders. And so I was planning to go to Georgia, the country, not the state, at the end of August in 2021. So I was planning all of that, looking forward to that. I was like, okay, I'm going to Georgia and then I'll figure it out while I'm there. I'm going there for 2 months and then I'll see what happens next. Because 2 months, especially in pandemic time, is a lot of time. Like a lot of things can change. So I was like, I'll just figure it out over there. And then 2 weeks before I was supposed to go to Georgia, the country went into a strict lockdown again. So I couldn't go. Over here, I don't know if it's the same in the United States, but here in Europe, we had like a map of all the countries that you could travel to. So the ones you could actually go to were green. Then you had some yellow countries where there were a lot of extra measurements, but you could still sort of travel there. And then orange and red, you couldn't go, or it was like really advised not to go. So there were like 5 or 6 countries around that time that were green. So I still remember on the 27th of August, I looked into it and I was like, okay, these are the countries. And I pretty much, like, I could have just thrown like a dart ball or like a dart at the map, just or like into those countries. And I landed on Bulgaria for some reason.
Wow.
And so 2 days later, I was on the plane to Bulgaria. I just booked my flights. They were quite cheap. And I was like, okay, I'm going to Bulgaria. I just need to get out of Amsterdam and out of this space for a while, which was the best decision ever because that's when I found out about podcast management.
Really? Oh my gosh. Okay. Your story just like blows my mind from the beginning to podcast manager. It like is so amazing. Just one, I cannot imagine what it was like to be in the travel industry when the pandemic started.
It was rough.
I can like kudos for you for like hanging in there for like as long as you did, and then realizing that you needed to get out for your mental health. Like that's that's super important. So like good for you for being able to realize that and having the guts to Like I would have been terrified because you didn't really have like anything in mind when you left that job, which is really scary to just go.
No. Yeah, it was. Well, I have to say the good thing is because I was saving up for my world trip and like before I knew the pandemic was going to hit. So I was saving up for the world trip. I knew I was going away. So because of that, I still lived at home. So at least I knew I had that cover, like, okay, I'm quitting my job, but I know I'll have a roof over my head, which was also something like, even though I had to choose my mental health, like I had the ability to do so as well, which I think is really important, because if you don't have that security, then it's probably an even bigger move to make that decision. Like, okay, I need to choose myself now instead of this job, because I mean, a lot of people are more dependent on their job than I was at that time.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like, so you said, oh, I have so many questions.
That's what I'm here for.
Yes. I'm like, oh my gosh, I could talk about this world trip for, I think probably the whole episode, but I'm going to try to save those questions for when we do the travel episode. But were you into podcasts before kind of like finding podcast management? Like, did you listen to podcasts at all or not really?
I did. And talking about it now makes me realize that the whole foundation of my business, like every road leads back to the start of the pandemic, because at the start of the pandemic, I went on a lot of walks because what else were you going to do? And that's when I sort of discovered podcasts as well. So I listened to a bunch of podcasts about traveling, true crime podcasts, a lot of mindset podcasts. And I was actually trying to learn some Spanish as well. And I found this really great podcast that helped you learn a little bit of Spanish too.
Nice.
So yeah, pretty much since the start of the pandemic, I've been hooked on podcasts.
Okay. I'm going to throw this random question out at you. What's one of your favorite podcasts that you listen to?
I really like the Zero to Travel podcast. It's by, I'm blanking on his name right now. I think it's Jason Moore, and he interviews a lot of people that travel around the world, and it's just really interesting. Another one I really like is Amateur Traveler, a travel podcast, which is also a podcast, which is, I think the Amateur Traveler one has like a different city or country central in every episode. So that's really cool. Oh. So those are the travel podcasts I like. And I have a couple of Dutch podcasts that I really like, but I'm not going to suggest them to you because it probably would be a little bit hard with the language barrier.
Nice. Oh, I love that. Zero to Travel podcast and Amateur Traveler podcast. Awesome. I'm going to have to check both of those out. So
yeah, they're really good.
I'm a huge fan of travel podcasts. And I also have too many podcasts to listen to. It's insane, but I'm definitely going to.
What is your favorite one?
Oh, no. I've been really into the Always Sunny in Philadelphia podcast. It's the cast and the writers and directors of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, kind of going back through their episodes and kind of talking about what it was like to make them and like behind the scenes stuff. And it's just like super funny. It's a real feel good podcast. Like I laugh like through the entire thing. So if you need a little like pick me up, it's a nice, refreshing podcast. So
it sounds really nice. Yeah. I just wrote it down, so I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah. And then the other one, I'm trying to stay away. I'm trying to not recommend true crime podcasts because I could get lost in that.
True crime podcasts.
Same. I'm trying to listen to like lighter stuff lately. You know, I have to take a break every now and then from true crime. But the Tony and Ryan podcast, it's an Australian podcast that you can only listen to on Spotify. But they're freaking hilarious. Like I love them. It's another one that you just like laugh through the entire episode. So they're really good for heartedness.
Yeah, I think especially with true crime, that's important. I just wrote this down as well. I have one true crime podcast that I really like called And That's Why We Drink.
Oh, I've not heard of that one.
It's two women that are talking about, so one has a segment that's true crime and then the other one has a paranormal segment. So they have like both their things, but it's really cool. And they're really funny.
Love both of those things. So I'll check that one out too. Ooh, this is fun. We could just sit here and trade podcast recommendations.
I know.
Oh my gosh. Okay. But all right, we'll get back to the podcast management stuff. Cause like I said, I could literally just talk about podcasts forever.
A lot of sideways.
So you said when you were on your trip to Bulgaria, which have never even thought about visiting Bulgaria, but I mean, how was that trip? What was one of your favorite things about it?
Oh my God, there were so many things. But before I start with that, like you said, I actually had never thought about visiting Bulgaria because there are so many countries here in Europe and I've been to quite a few. But for some reason, I always focus on like far away travel. And then I was always like, when I'm older, I can do all the countries that are closer by, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
And then for some reason, Georgia always really intrigued me. But since that was an option, it was like, I'm so happy that because that didn't happen, I ended up in Bulgaria because I had only ever heard of the capital, Sofia, and then I think on the coast we have Sunny Beach, and that's where all like the students are going on their holidays to drink and party. So that's the only two things I knew about Bulgaria. And then I started doing some research, and I actually visited the smallest village in all of Bulgaria. I think it has like a population of 200 people. They didn't speak English, and I didn't speak Bulgarian besides hello and thank you. Those were the words I've learned. Which I think is very important when you travel, at least learn how to say hello and thank you, then you'll come a long way. Yeah. So, and that was quite a challenge to get there as well, because I had a bus there and it took me 4 hours and I ended up on the right bus, but like 3.5 hours into the trip, the bus stopped at a bus stop and everyone got off the bus, including the bus driver. And I was sitting there and I was looking on my Google Maps and I was like, I'm not where I'm supposed to be at. This isn't right. So I went outside trying to ask people. They weren't really helpful. So after like not finding an answer to my question, I was like, I think I'm just going to get back on the bus. Luckily, the bus driver ended up, and apparently I was the only way going all the way to Melnik, which is a small village. On the last 20 minutes, we also stopped at a bus or at a tank, how do you say it in English, a gas station.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was going for a snack and the bus needed to get filled up, which I'm not used to because like over here in the Netherlands where you take a bus, you never stop at a gas station. So that was really random to me as well. And then I ended up there and checking in was quite an adventure as well. I literally had to do it like hand and feet, sign language. The lady was looking at me like, what are you doing here? And I just held my hands up to my ear like, sleeping. So that was my check-in there. So I think that was one of my favorite parts in Bulgaria. But it's not where I found out about podcast management.
Yeah, that was my next question. Because of all I don't know, I find it so interesting that like it kind of like took a trip to Bulgaria to find podcast management. So how did the trip kind of influence this new career?
Well, I probably could have found out about it in Amsterdam as well, but it happened to be in Bulgaria. I was just traveling around and at one point I went to the coast and took a break at the beach and just thought about all of the stuff that had happened in the last year and everything that was going on. And every day still in my head, I had that little voice saying, I want to do something online. I need to figure this out. So I was in a Facebook group and I saw someone posting about podcast management. So I sent her a message if she could send me some more info about it. So we connected, we chatted a bit, and she told me that she was going to launch a program, a 2-month program in which she would teach VAs, online service providers, and people that weren't working online yet, but wanted to start out online, how to become a podcast manager. So we really clicked as well. And this was at the end of September when she told me about it. And the program would start in December. So I signed up for that because it just felt good. And I had a nice connection with her. And she was going to teach me about launching podcasts, about the editing, like all the ins and outs, everything you need from A to Z to become a podcast manager. And it just sounded really good.
Oh, that's awesome. So it was a 10-month program?
It was a 2-month program.
2 months. Oh, okay. I was like 10 months. Holy shit. They really dive into it.
It was just 2 months. Yeah.
Oh, that's still pretty good.
So that was pretty fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Liz, I always say that, I feel like I say this a lot on the podcast too, but like the power of social media, like where it has its like, there are pros and cons to it. One of the big pros, I think, is being able to connect with people around the world and like find things like you did, like this podcast management program that you may not have found otherwise.
Exactly. And it came at the right time. Like I really needed it. I was getting so fed up with not knowing what I wanted to do next. And I was about 3 or 4 weeks into my trip and almost coming back again because like I didn't book a flight back because I was like, I'll just book my flight when I'm ready to go. But I knew my trip was coming to an end towards that time. And like it just came at the right time. And I felt like, I really it clicked because I love podcasts. I was listening to podcasts on my trip as well because I had a lot of long bus journeys. And I just felt like I had to do this, even though it was going to be a bit of an investment, which is always scary, of course. But I was like, if I'm not going to do this, I'm going to regret this. And it turned out to be really good.
What's one of the things that you are most looking forward to when it comes to podcast management? Like what's something that you're like really pumped about when it comes to podcasts?
I just love editing. I love editing
Really?
in every form. Yeah, I know it's like a very lengthy process. It takes a lot of time, but I just love it. I think it goes back to when I was a little bit younger. Whenever I would travel, I would film everything and make like little travel vlogs for YouTube, which I really enjoyed doing. And then I could show my friends and family, like, look at all the things I did. I always really enjoyed that. So I guess that's why it only made sense when I read about podcast management. I was like, duh, how haven't I thought about this before? But it's just not something, I think it's really up and coming right now because before that, I had never heard of someone being a podcast manager. So yeah, the editing, I really like that. And I didn't even know what audiograms were before starting the Podcast Manager Academy, but I really enjoy making those as well because I like making things look pretty and stuff.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And editing is like, I think a lot of podcasters would tell you it's like the worst part of podcasting is having to do the editing because it takes so long.
But also I think when you're like the one that also has recorded the episode, you already know what's going to be said, you know what's been spoken about. And for me as a podcast manager, it's fun because I love listening to podcasts, especially when those are interesting topics to me. Then I get to listen and learn while I edit. So I think that's a big difference.
That makes total sense. You're getting like a sneak peek of the podcast episodes. I love that. Have you found that you've like struggled with anything transitioning from like having a more traditional job, I guess, like in the travel industry to working for yourself? Like, have there been any challenges that you've experienced?
Yeah, a couple of them. I think the most important one is like the self-doubt that comes with it because I don't know about when you started your business, but not a lot of people in my surroundings have their own business. So whenever I told people like, hey, I want to do this, they were all like, oh, are you going to be able to make money from that? Isn't that going to be hard? So, and with having my own self-doubt already, like that only became worse. So that was something I really had to work on. And that's also really nice because the woman who did the Podcast Manager Academy, her name is Valerie. She's actually turned into a really good friend of mine now as well. So it's really nice that I did her program and then we became friends. So now I have like some business friends as well. And so whenever I'm having some self-doubts, I can just go to them and then they can relate or tell me like, hey, we've all been there. And I think the big part, because it's all online, is like stepping out of my comfort zone, like putting yourself out there on Instagram. I don't really post a lot like on my personal Instagram. And then now all of a sudden having to constantly show up also with like my face and appearance and everything on Instagram. Like I'm getting better at it. Like at some point I was just like, okay, Nina, just shut up, just do it. And then when I started doing it, I actually started to get a little bit more fun out of it as well, because I was like, this isn't really that bad. But it's really like getting over that obstacle that like you're making it so big in your head and you just need to like get over it.
Just do it. Yeah. I need some of your motivation, I guess, because that's something I really struggle with still as a small business owner is showing myself, like making videos and doing reels scary. And all. It is terrifying.
It is. I think the only reason that like I want to make my business a success, obviously, otherwise there's no use in beginning it. But I think it's really important to just keep your goals in mind. Like, I'm starting this business because I love podcasts. I want to learn more about all the topics that my clients are going to be covering, and I'll be editing, of course. And I want to travel, and this is the way to get to that goal. So I think that's really important, because I booked flights to Thailand for January, and I want to work from there. And like, so I'm just like tunnel vision, thinking about Thailand all the time. Whenever I'm like, oh, I don't want to post this video, or because I look silly or whatever, I'm just like, think Thailand, think Thailand.
Yes, that's a good reason. Thailand, oh, another place. Have you been there before?
No, it was to be my first stop on my world trip.
Oh my gosh. I have not been either, but it looks stunning. Like Thailand looks like it is just a beautiful place to go.
It looks amazing. And like, there's so much diversity over there. You have the cities, you have like Chiang Mai up in the mountains, you have the beaches, the islands. There's so much to do there. And I love the food. Like, I travel anywhere for food. That's important.
I love that. Oh my gosh. So what advice do you have for podcasters that might be struggling with managing their podcasts? Like, do you have any tips or tricks?
I mean, I think when you start a podcast, it needs to be fun, because it takes a lot of time to not just record, but like you said, also the editing, writing the show notes, doing the audiograms. So I think you need to make sure that you keep enjoying it. And once you start struggling with anything, whether it's like the editing, the show notes, and the audiograms, or just one of these things, it might be a good idea to outsource some of the things, because if you're not enjoying, or if you're struggling with some of these things, then you're not going to look forward to doing it. And then it's probably like you're not putting in 100%. So I think whenever you reach that point, it might be worth to look into getting some help.
Yeah, no, that is great advice. I think anytime you stop enjoying what you're doing, it might be time to like reevaluate or step away for a bit, or like you said, like get help from someone else. Like, I know that's something exactly. I'm looking forward to, is possibly working with you in the future on my podcast, which I'm super excited about. So that's
me too.
Gets me pumped. It like brings a whole new energy to podcasting. So I'm looking forward to that a lot.
I know. I mean, that's great. And it also gives you like so much time as a podcaster, like all the time you don't have to spend on the editing and everything else that comes with it. Like, you can focus that on like the parts that you do enjoy, and like maybe find new things you want to do, and you just have so much like new time to spare.
It's going to be, it's a whole new experience. I don't know. I'm really looking forward to it, because I'm like, yes, that's less time I have to spend, like you said, on editing. More time I can spend on like the things I enjoy about podcasting. So great advice. Yeah. And then one of my last questions is, how do you, because you really like, what's the phrase that people use? Like, I guess you kind of like left it up to fate, and when you quit your job and you were like, I'll find something, like I'll make it. And now you have your own business, which is freaking amazing. And it's something that you enjoy, which is even better. And so I guess, like, what tips do you have for people that are maybe looking to do something similar, like quit their job? Maybe they're looking to start their own podcast management business. Like, what advice would you have for them?
Just do it. Don't wait too long, because I feel like even I sort of waited too long, because like I said, I quit my job like 4 months into the pandemic, and I didn't really fully take action until the next year. Like, I sort of wasted a whole year, because I wouldn't say wasted, because I was working on myself and like the mental state I was in. But in hindsight, I wish I would have started so much sooner. On the other hand, I also think like the program came at a time when I really was fed up and really needed it. So sometimes things just don't work out straight away, but just do it. Or if you're thinking about doing something like that, actively search for it online. Maybe there's a program out there that you can join, or a course or anything like that. But I would just suggest not waiting too long, because I mean, if you want to do it, like, there's no use in waiting around. And for me, I think like I quit my job and then I had some other jobs. Even now, I started my business, and then like a few months later, I still decided to get like a side job on the side to make sure I can cover like paying my bills and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what can possibly go wrong? There's so many options. Even if you're not in like a full-time income straight away when you start your business, there's always ways that you can make some money on the side, or like nothing can go wrong. I think that's my advice. Like, just do it. Nothing can go wrong. There's always other options, but just keep in mind, like, if you want to do this, just fully go for it, and then make sure that that's like your main path that you're taking, if that's your dream. And then there's always some side paths you can take if it's not going the way you planned, I guess. But just make sure you stay on the main paths mostly.
Yeah, again, amazing. That's such good advice, because I think people forget that like there are ways to do both. Like, you can follow your passion and start your own business, and also, like you said, have like some side income coming from a part-time job or something. But I think people I don't want to say they get too focused on like starting their own business, and then they get like frustrated because they're not making any money, and then they end up quitting and going back to like doing whatever. But yeah, I like how you put that nothing can, like, it can't really go wrong if you're following your passion.
Yeah, like when I started my business a couple of months ago, I was like, great, I never have to work for anybody else ever again. And I was in my head like, I have my own business now. I'm going to make my money. And I mean, it's an online business and I'm new to it, so it's taking some time to build it up, which makes sense. And in the beginning, I really got into my head about it. And then like 10 minutes away from my house, there's a bagel shop. So I went over there, applied for a job, and now I'm working there 3 days a week. And the other days I'm spending working on my business. And I noticed that now I have some time to relax and not just focus on, I need clients. Like, I need to have a full-time income from my business. Like, it's going to happen. That's the goal. And I am confident that I will get there, but it just takes a little bit longer. And then, I mean, I'm actually having a blast at the bagel shop until December as well, until I go to Thailand. So yeah, I mean, and there's always ways you can figure everything out. Everything is figure outable.
Ah, I love that.
Is that a word?
It is. Do you know what is hilarious is like, I had never heard that phrase, like everything is figure outable, until maybe like a month ago. And now I'm hearing it everywhere. And I'm like, it must mean something, because I'm hearing it like constantly. So now that you said it, I'm like, that's it. Something is in the universe telling me that everything is figure outable.
I think that's the new mindset from now on for everyone. Just everything's figure outable.
Oh my gosh. Is there anything that you're like currently working on that you'd like to share with listeners? Like, do you have any programs or offers or anything coming up?
Well, I'm actually really excited because we spoke to each other last week, and I have like 3 set packages that I'm really excited about. But one thing we spoke about, repurposing podcast episodes into blog posts. And I had been thinking about that before, and maybe even offering transcripts, because I was chatting with a friend, and at that time she was doing like a sign language course. And we were talking about how podcasts aren't like inclusive for people with like hearing disabilities. So then I started thinking about maybe offering like a service where I would like we discussed, like do the podcast episode and repurpose it into a blog post, because I think it's really important that podcasting is also inclusive. So that's one of the offers I'm currently working out. And apart from that, I still have like the 3 packages, and I'm just finding my way into my new business right now. So that's what I'm mostly focusing on.
Yeah, I think I love the idea of repurposing podcasts into blog posts, and like you said, making it more inclusive, because it's definitely something that is, I would say it's missing a little bit in the podcast community, but I think we're slowly getting there, but we're really slow.
It's really slow. So I think that would be, I think that would be a nice service to offer as well. And not just like blog repurposing, I was thinking that, but I want to take it a little bit further and doing like transcripts maybe as well. But I just need to figure out like how I'm going to get everything together. So that's what I'm currently working on.
I love that. Those are great services. Where can, like, if folks are interested in connecting with you, maybe doing like a consultation call and stuff like that, like where can they find you at online?
I am on Instagram, so you can find me on at the Podcast Voyage. There's a link in my bio where you can check out all of my packages and apply for a consultation or a discovery call. Like if you have any questions, I'd be happy to chat. And yeah, all the information is right over there.
Awesome. And I will, of course, include all of Nina's information in the episode description so you can find her super, super easy. And before we wrap up, I don't know if I want to ask this question or if I want to save it. I think I'm going to save the bucket list question for when we do our travel episode. Because I think
it might be a good idea.
I think it'll fit better in that episode. So I'm going to save the bucket list activities question. So make sure if you're listening to this episode that you come back for the second episode that I do with Nina so you can hear what her bucket list activity is. And with that, I mean, I cannot thank you enough for joining me today. Like this has been absolutely wonderful and I've loved having you on the podcast. So thank you so much.
Oh my God, thank you so much. This was so much fun. I love this. And I'm so excited for the second episode already.
I know. I could literally talk about travel forever. So I cannot wait to have you back on. And
me too.
I just can't wait to talk about your travel adventures because I have so many questions.
It's going to be so good.
So many questions.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And listeners, I want to thank you as well for tuning in. And if you have questions, comments for me or any of my guests, including Nina, you can text or call us on our hotline, 252-419-6004, and we will include them in a future episode of the podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at Fun with Friends Podcast, and be sure to like, rate, and review the Fun with Friends podcast wherever you listen to it. And with that, get out there, try something new, and have some fucking fun. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Fun with Friends podcast, a CEI media production. Please like, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast as it helps us greatly. You can follow us on Instagram at Fun with Friends podcast and on Facebook. If you would like to support the podcast, you can become a Patreon for just $5 a month. The link is in the episode description. Now get out there, try something new, and have some fun. Bye.